Greetings, everyone. My name is Tsedey. You have joined the Just Communities webinar. I'm the director of Just Communities, and we're going to get started in just a minute. Xavier, if you can turn down the music. All right. If you just joined us, thank you for being here. You've joined the Just Communities webinar. My name is Tsedey again. I'm the director of Just Communities. It's a beautiful day here in Atlanta, and we are going to talk about one of my favorite topics, community benefits agreements, and community benefits ordinances. I'm going to do a quick intro on who we are, and then we'll jump into the conversation. Xavier, if you can go to the first slide. So for those of you that are new to Just Communities, thank you for being with us. We are a reincarnation of the International Eco Districts brand. Eco Districts was an international standardizing organization for the development field. They were credentialing development projects and districts for having strong environmental sustainability standards. And then the Partnership for Southern Equity is a longstanding racial justice advocacy organization. We've worked on many issues of climate justice, economic justice, specifically around land. And so we acquired eco districts a few years ago. And with that acquisition, we merged the eco districts high standards for climate resilience in development with our critical analysis about race and land. And we created Just Communities. Next slide, Xavier. This is a very high level view of our model. We call it the Just Communities Protocol. It is, well, you don't see our two pillars. Oh, actually, you do it right at the center. You can see the two pillars of racial equity and climate resilience, and everything else just kind of flows from there. Our model is essentially a planning tool that can be used for a single development project or to plan the ongoing development of your community, your neighborhood. But it is specifically designed for developments that are large, neighborhood scale, like that have multiple buildings. And the thing that I always want people to know about our model is what we're asserting is that if you use a different planning process for your development, it will produce different outcomes. Typically, residents find out about a new development that's coming to town, either in the permitting process if it requires a variance, because most places require some community body to make a recommendation around the variance, or more likely, much further down the process when the building begins. Our model requires a very rigorous participation of the community. So that includes the end users, of course, the developer, but also just all of the stakeholders, all of the people in that community that will directly or indirectly be impacted by the development. We even go as far as requiring a governance process and structure in our model that can facilitate shared decision making. So that's the difference that we're trying to make. Next slide. I always like to ground our conversations with our values, so I'm just going to read over them very quickly. We believe in radical truth and understanding of history, healing and liberation, honoring the wisdom and power of communities, racial equity as the superior growth model, a just climate transition, and policies that reform, repair, and reconcile past harms. Next slide. And we like to say that Just Communities is a reimagining of how communities grow. We currently have two main offerings. The first is our accredited practitioners program. This is a very robust introduction to our standards in racial equity and climate resilience in the development process. So if you are a professional in any of the fields that touch development, architect, urban planner, community organizer, real estate agent, builder, engineer, etc., this would be a good way for you to learn how to implement those practices into your work. Or if you are just an active resident who is involved in your community and you want to learn how your community can develop in a way that is more equitable and sustainable, this would also be a great course for you. You can take the asynchronous on your own time. That's the version that you just buy off of our website. It's a nominal cost. I think it ranges from $250 to $350. Or you can join us for the live course. We have one coming up in a few days, I think next Tuesday and Wednesday. It's a good time if you just like talking about these topics, and you would be tapping into a vast network, about 250 or so APs all over the country, really all over the world. And you can also sign up for that on our website. And then, of course, we have this monthly webinar series, which is our platform to celebrate and share all of the good works out there that are demonstrating Just Communities practices and values. And I think, oh, a quick plug for our webinar next month. We're going to have the Lincoln Institute, which is one of the foremost research institutes on land in this country. And we're going to have Patrick and Naamini talk about land value capture tools, particularly how they can be used to improve cities' climate resilience. That sounds very wonky and technical. I promise it's not going to be a technical conversation. So please come back for that. And now segueing into today's conversation. So I mentioned the big idea behind Just Communities is really, we're really trying to shake up how development happens. When you think about some of the challenges that your community faces, particularly some of the most harmful inequities that our communities are faced with, they are probably the result of some land use decision or some development decision, whether that's gentrification or Cancer Alley in Louisiana, or even in some of our really progressive and relatively wealthy cities like LA or Seattle that have really large unhoused populations. If we could change how some of those decisions are made, we believe a different process will render different outcomes, which is why I love talking about community benefits agreements and ordinances, because they're one of the tools that we have in our toolbox that really demonstrates how a city, specifically a local government, can take a very different approach to a new development that's coming to town, to a big business that's coming to town, that will transform the outcomes of that development to really benefit the residents of your community, particularly the residents that are already there, that have been there for a long time, as opposed to the ones that we know that will come after the development. So now we can get into that conversation. Today, I'm so happy to have Aaron Goodman, who's with the city of Detroit, and Meagan Niebler, who is with Fairshake, with us. They are going to talk about their expertise and their experience using these tools. I'm going to read their bios very quickly, and then they're going to give some presentations, and then we will have a conversation. All right, so Give me 1 minute. Okay, so Aaron Goodman is an urban planner with over 20 years of experience in community development. Since 2019, he has served the City of Detroit Planning and Development Department as the manager of Detroit's Community Benefits Ordinance process. In this role, Aaron brings together the community and developers while guiding some of Detroit's most significant development projects through the engagement, benefits negotiation, and approval process. Previously, he was the Community Engagement Director for Community Development Advocates of Detroit, CDAD, and also served as a Peace Corps volunteer in the West African countries of Mauritania and Senegal. Aaron has received several honors, including a Spirit of Detroit Award, and completed the Detroit Revitalization Fellowship. He earned a bachelor's degree in social sciences and a master's degree in urban planning from the University of Michigan. I'm trying to remember what the team of Michigan is. I should know this. Okay. I usually say like go Bears or whatever the team
Go
is for.
blue.
What is it?
Go blue.
Oh,
The
go
Wolverines, though. Anyway.
Wolverines. That's what it is. Okay. Okay. All right. And then Meagan Niebler, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, works as a community democracy program manager with Fair Shake Environmental Legal Services and is passionate about being a resource for environmental justice communities to find levers they can pull to move their vision into action. For the past 2 years, Meagan has been supporting EJ communities in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia during community benefits processes, including facilitating community engagement and community education, providing technical assistance to coalitions, and creating tools and templates in support of proactive and reactive community benefit coalitions, agreements, ordinances, and plans. She's also worked as a birth doula, supporting pregnant and parenting teens and Latinx families, and uh, developing, implementing, and evaluating sex education programs, including the evidence-based LIFT program, which stands for Linking Families and Teens. Meagan lives in Pittsburgh with her partner and 2 kids. Um, Welcome to both of you. So I think that we are going to start with Aaron. So Aaron, if you can join me, I'm going to pass the mic on to you now.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Tsedey. Thank you for the invitation to join this group. Been interested in the work of the Partnership for Southern Equity for some time, and also had worked on eco districts here in Detroit some time ago. So nice to know about that kind of connection. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and kind of take people through. And I'm always gratified with the interest that people have in the city's city of Detroit and our community benefits ordinance process. So I'm gonna test this out. Can you all see my screen? Okay, great. You can hear me? Okay, okay. So great. So thanks again for the invitation and for the wonderful introduction. Really appreciate that. Whenever I submit a bio, I forget that someone might like read the whole thing. Um, we City of Detroit, we have a community benefits ordinance, and I think it's always helpful to kind of start with a little bit of history about how did we get here, because we are the first major city in the country to have that. So we've had a long history of development, particularly over the past 20 years. Maybe people have heard recently Gordie Howe International Bridge has been in the news a lot as a kind of an international concern, linking Detroit to Canada, a new bridge that's opening up. But these are examples of developments that have come prior to us to having a CBO and really, kind of sparked some of the conversations around community benefits in Detroit. So Gordie Howe International Bridge being a prime example. We've had oil refineries get kind of big tax breaks, but not really deliver on jobs. And, sometimes, have emission violations. We built a new hockey arena about a dozen years ago. That was kind of a big impetus also for people saying like, hey, there should be a way that we can do this better to make sure that these big projects that a lot of people are excited about are actually delivering for Detroiters. So these are just some examples and some headlines. So basically, from about 2014 to 2016, there was really an effort for establishing a community benefits ordinance here in the city of Detroit. First at City Council, when that kind of stalled out a little bit, the coalition. In my previous role, I was in an organization at CDED that was part of this coalition. Actually, went ahead and collected the signatures necessary to put a community benefits ordinance on the ballot in 2016. Um, Interestingly enough, interesting story that actually prompted city council and developers at development community had some concerns, and they actually proposed an alternative community benefits ordinance. So we had the interesting kind of situation in 2016 where we had Prop A and Prop B, both community benefits ordinances. Both one was Prop A was considered like the community's ordinance, and Prop B was considered maybe the the city council or the mayors or the development community's kind of version of it. Proposition B ultimately won. They each nearly got 100,000 votes, so they were both very popular. And Proposition B is the framework ordinance that we have to date. So, uh, so here we are today. We have the Community Benefits Ordinance approved by Detroiters during the 2016 election. Has gone through some amendments since then in 2021, but as I mentioned, it is Detroit's. We had the first such law in a major U.S. city. We're very proud of that, and we're 10 years in now. So a lot I've learned. Just a few kind of definitions I think is very important because I mean, really, community benefits ordinance is kind of an innovation in the community benefits space. We've had community benefits agreements for a long time, but having an ordinance mandating this process was something new in 2016. So in Detroit, when we talk about community benefits ordinance, we are talking about a process for developers to where they will proactively engage with the community for the purpose of identifying and addressing impacts associated with their project. Community benefits agreement, more widely used across the country, or a CBA, and anyone that works in government knows we love our acronyms. So that is a contract between a local community and a developer that requires the developer to provide specific amenities and or mitigations to the local community or neighborhood. Sometimes that is between literally a community group, a local community, and the developer. Sometimes in the case of Detroit and via our ordinances, it's an agreement between the developer and the city itself, the city corporation. I'm going to talk a little bit about how our ordinance works here. So we have two tiers of projects. I'm going to start with tier 2, which may seem a little bit out of order, but these are the smaller projects. And honestly, I'll spend most of the time talking about tier 1. So we do have tier 2 projects. Those are projects that have a $3 million or more investment in construction and are either seeking some sort of city support in the form of a tax abatement or city land at a discount that has to be valued. Either of those have to be valued at $300,000. Or a tier 2 project. The developer is required to work with the planning department. That's where I work. If I didn't mention that before, the planning and development department to mitigate potential negative impacts of the project on residents and neighborhoods. They go through a process we call concept plan review or design review, more colloquially. The developer also has to work with the city to promote the hiring, training, and employability of Detroit residents via our civil rights department and our employment agency, Detroit at Work. And developers' commitments, for the above are included with the development agreement. I need some more updated numbers, but I'll just say in 2024, we had about 70 projects go through this process. And this is a very internal kind of facing process. There's no particular community engagement that's mandated through a tier 2 project. So a lot of them kind of, go through our administrative processes. So now I'm going to move on to tier 1, and really the rest of what I'm going to talk about is going to talk more about tier 1.
Can I ask you a really quick question, Aaron? I'm so sorry, before you move on from that last slide. And I forgot to mention for our audience, if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A, and I'll be keeping an eye on that. But this last box, or 300,000 or more in value of city property sale or transfer for below market value and without open bidding. Can you explain that?
It's a mouthful, and it's pretty. I'll be honest. 99% of the time we deal with projects that are seeking tax abatements.
Okay, okay.
But in this case, I think, what it means is basically the city is selling the developer land
Uh-huh.
that's got to be valued at least
Got
300,000,
it. Okay.
and it's not being put on like um, for an RFP or something,
Got it. Okay.
and we're selling it at below market value. So maybe valued 300,000, but the purchase price is something below that.
I see. Okay.
A little complicated.
Thank you.
Uh, Similar kind of setup for tier one projects, 75 million or more, so much larger projects in construction costs. And then they're either seeking $1 million or more in state tax abatements from the city or $1 million or more worth of property, kind of under that same framework. We've had 16 of these tier one projects approved since 2017 in the last decade. Big overview of our process here. Again, this is a process designed for developers to proactively engage with the community to identify and address impacts. So just kind of overall, some of the key components here. We'll go into more detail, though I don't know how much time I have to get too deep into it. So we form a neighborhood advisory council when we have one of these projects. That consists of 9 residents who live within the impact area. We also establish an impact area, as you might guess from that. I'll talk a little bit more about that. My department, we facilitate a series of public meetings with the neighborhood advisory council and the developer, and these are public meetings to basically go through the process of identifying what are the project impacts, what is important to community about this project, what are they worried about, what do they hope to see. From that, those conversations over a series of meetings, the neighborhood advisory council is going to develop basically what we call an impact list, where they're going to list out what are their concerns, what are their benefit requests, and the developer is going to prepare a response. You can imagine there is some back and forth iteration, negotiation, over a series of meetings. But at the end of all that, the city and the developer are basically, we're going to create a written legal agreement in response to those impacts that has the support of the neighborhood advisory council. Just a little bit more detail. I mentioned impact area. So we defined an impact area. It has to include at least the census tract of that project. Often will include more than that, depending on how large of a project that is. We send notice of the first meeting to all residents of that impact area and even a little bit beyond, and the 300 feet outside the impact area, including, so it can be a pretty large group of people, usually thousands of mailers. Impact area is really important because that basically says if you live in the impact area, you're eligible to serve on the neighborhood advisory council. So you have to live in the impact area. That's the number one requirement. Also, the process of appointing NAC members, which I'll get into in just a second, there is a process for residents to actually vote on 2 of those members directly. So you have to live in the impact area also to vote at one of the meetings on candidates. But our process is really set up to focus discussion around the impact area residents. However, all our meetings are public, open to the public. All are welcome to participate. Since COVID, we do them all hybrid, so we broadcast these meetings and people can call in too and give their opinion as well. This is an example of a meeting notice here on the right. You can see the impact area for this project, all the details about what's happening with that project. Neighborhood Advisory Council, just to break it down a little bit, we have 9 members on it. 2, as I mentioned, are elected directly by impact area residents attending the meeting where that happens. 3 are appointed by our city council. We have a hybrid at-large and district system, so our at-large members each get to appoint someone, and the district member where the project is also gets to appoint one. And then 4 are appointed by planning and development, and we are part of the executive administration of the city. So we have a legislative branch and the executive branch. You have to be a resident of the impact area, as I mentioned, at least 18 years of age. You have to be nominated at the public CBO meeting to run, and you cannot have any conflicts of interest either with the city or the developer. This is a pretty lengthy process. This kind of gives you an idea of how long, from internal preparation to holding those public meetings to developing the final agreement and our report to approvals at city council, because after it goes through all that, this agreement, along with the tax incentives or whatever kind of land they're requesting, all has to get approved by city council. So we usually want a budget from like when they first bring it to our office to when we're expecting to go through city council at a minimum 6 months. That is the ideal. That's what we ask for, even though we don't always get that. I won't go into too much detail on this, but we usually have kind of a standard set of meetings that we plan for in this process. Usually about 9 public meetings over 10 weeks. But sometimes we do less. There's a certain amount outlined in the ordinance, but the NAC can decide to do less if they've been satisfied, or we can do more if we're not. But usually the most we've done has been, I want to say 9 over these 10 weeks. So it's usually a weekly meeting. Once these are the tier 1 public meetings are completed, what basically kind of like the ending point of that is the neighborhood advisory council will vote to say, yeah, we're satisfied with the agreement. They'll have a support letter that they provide to city council about that. My office, myself and my colleagues will create a community benefits report to submit as well. This basically documents the whole process. It's all submitted with a development project package to city council. And then city council will deliberate and decide whether or not they want to approve that. And at that point, we'll move on to the monitoring and enforcement period, which includes annual update meetings for a certain period of time and biannual compliance reports. And we have a website. We try and make all the documentation through the process and afterwards available on our website, detroitmi.gov/CBO, to keep it easy. The community benefits agreement often is called the community benefits provision, kind of the same thing, but basically it contains 4 main elements. The list of the benefits the developer has agreed to provide, the enforcement mechanisms for the community benefits provision, the requirement for the developers to submit compliance reports, and the future community engagement requirements vis-a-vis those public meetings, annual update meetings. And this will remain in effect throughout the duration of the project. This is an example. We do compliance reports, not my office. We have our Civil Rights Inclusion Opportunity Office that's in charge of monitoring on behalf of what's called the Enforcement Committee. But this is an example of a project, and usually it's a many-page report, but this is like the summary where it kind of says where they are with all their commitments, if they're on track, if they've gotten off track, if it hasn't started for some reason, or if they've completed it. So then this kind of talks about, they do these reports twice a year. Citizen inquiries can be submitted, reviewed by city staff, and formal complaints from the Neighborhood Advisory Council are investigated by the Enforcement Committee. Outcomes, we've done 16 projects since 2017. This is a map of kind of where those projects are taking place and also the accompanying impact areas around those. If you know Detroit, you can see that most of them are kind of, I don't know if my mouse is visible, but the central kind of downtown area, and kind of from there, we've had a few projects a little further out. But really, these have kind of represent some of the most significant development projects in the city of Detroit over the last 10 years. Big numbers of, billions of dollars in investment, thousands of new housing units, millions of square feet of commercial space and industrial space. Estimates, and these are estimates that are provided to us at the time of when we go through this process. So, whether these pan out exactly in this regard, I can't necessarily tell you off the top of my head, but 33,000 estimated construction jobs, almost 25,000 permanent jobs, and also just on a taxing basis, they represent an estimated $2 billion of net revenue benefit to the city of Detroit over 35 years. See some of the notable ones that we've done. If you're familiar with Detroit, you may or may not know these projects, but we opened a new auto assembly plant on the east side. The second tallest building in Michigan was built, the Hudson's building on the site of the former Hudson's department store. The restoration of our historic train station called Michigan Central by Ford Motor Company. Converting a huge old auto plant called Fisher Body into 400 apartments. The District Detroit, which is kind of a sprawling multi-10 building proposal centered around kind of our sports and entertainment district, and then a brand new hospital expansion for Henry Ford Health System. They call it the Future of Health. They're currently building a brand new hospital tower across the street from their historic one. So these are just some of the very kind of large projects. They all went through the community benefits process. Like I mentioned, we've had 16 of these. That means 120 plus public CBO meetings through those process. We've had almost 140 residents serve on neighborhood advisory councils, and over 2,000 residents participate in some way in these processes. Resident engagement. Our process is very focused on resident engagement. And we really believe, from the city perspective, that listening to neighbors is going to equal positive impact on development. Creating that meaningful opportunity for community engagement, for the community to, kind of express their concerns and their hopes for the project in direct dialogue with the developer. The developer gets to hear that. Communities also get, a lot of information about the project, construction timeline, financing, and really for our neighborhood advisory council members. And this is a photo of our neighborhood advisory council on a project along with the developers, city folks, like we're all kind of sitting at a table here. Really is just like a unique and meaningful opportunity to impact development here in the city of Detroit. Talk real briefly, just kind of like what kind of benefits are we talking about here? Our process is really set up, we focus on impacts in the community and how to mitigate those, or how to provide, and also how to provide benefit. But really, the ordinance speaks specifically to impacts. But that has involved also monetary contributions on behalf of developers to certain projects, whether it's about affordable housing, community grants, those sort of things. So that's kind of where these numbers come in. Also, estimate of about $50 million in direct developer contributions across all those projects we mentioned, but also maybe 800 million, and this is a little hard to calculate, in cumulative kind of spinoff benefits as a result of the project as well. But it's admittedly a little harder to quantify. But some of the topics that often get covered include construction management and mitigation, parks and public space improvements, site design, traffic mitigations, accessibility is big, parking, jobs and workforce development, jobs for Detroiters, affordable housing, supporting local businesses, continued public engagement, sustainability, and also supporting community initiatives. I know and this is my last slide, but I think maybe some things to think about, and maybe this will be part of the discussion as well. I think when we were doing the prep call, we talked about maybe reflect on some lessons learned, particularly if someone's interested in doing like a community benefits ordinance. So I think, an important question, I think, any city community would want to consider is like, what do you want to achieve through the CBA? Are you trying to mitigate project impacts? Is this kind of like a litmus test on the development itself? What are you looking for? Just being really clear on that.
Mm-hmm.
What projects to qualify? We obviously have our version of like what qualifies, but there could be different types of perspectives on that. I would say that part of what makes our CBA work from a legal perspective is because it's based on the fact that you're receiving some sort of incentive or benefit from the city,
Right.
which makes us a market actor. So opposed to something like a rezoning or a site plan tying it to that, you run into basically in the legal world called the takings issues. So unless it has like a strong kind of like connection, the benefit needs to have some sort of real direct connection in it. So, but because we're a market actor now, we're like a partner in the development. It gives a
Mm-hmm.
lot more leeway for the type of community benefits agreements you can draft.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Facilitation and process management. It's a very process driven uh, thing that we do here, and it's really important because PDD, planning development, we come through and we are here to facilitate the process. We don't bring this project forward unless it's supported by the overall city administration, but also just the importance to have strong facilitation, both of the developer, of the NAC, of the public, so that everyone feels like they're being heard, that it's, clear that this is, an open forum and we're not, trying to steer the conversation necessarily one way or another. Timeline pressures, I kind of mentioned it before, start as early as possible on these projects, particularly involving, such an intensive community engagement thing. And I think, you run into the issue where developers, they have their timelines.
Right.
And when they need to get things approved by, and they've been working on this for a long time before it ever gets to this point. And then you bring in NAC members, community, and all of a sudden everyone feels very kind of squeezed, and it happens every time. So figure out how to like build in enough time for this process. Residents who serve on the neighborhood advisory council, so invaluable and have a really tough job, I would say. And because I think, and I'm happy to talk more about it. It's just, it may not be what they expect. They are now kind of up there representing the community and all the good and bad that comes with that. And they're dealing with a lot of information, having to work together as a group for the first time. Some may know each other, some may not, and forming some sort of cohesive kind of body to work with the developer and also channel what the community wants and also deal with when the community may be disappointed that they don't get everything that is kind of put out there. It's not easy. I try, me and my team, we're here to support them, but it's it's not easy. The balance between like such a robust engagement process and also like we've done these summit 16 times now, and it's kind of like what I want to say. We kind of know what some of the benefits maybe should be, and
Hmm.
so do we spend time kind of creating like a unique community benefits agreement each time, or how do we kind of streamline sort of these things and really provide certainty for community and also for the developer? CBAs, on the other hand, can test out new policy and programs ideas that maybe will lead to broader adoption. I could talk more about that, but I don't want to take up too much more time. The infrastructure of having this CBO, that's the last thing I'll say, provides infrastructure that really can facilitate a robust agreement with monitoring enforcement. We're a party to the agreement. And I think that's a big difference between a community benefits agreement that's just with community groups. So that's it. That's me. I know I want to pass it off to our co-presenter. And so thank you. And I'll be happy to answer questions after.
Thank you so much. That was very comprehensive and concise at the same time. Before we have Megan come up, or Megan, you can go ahead and come up. I do want to knock out some of these questions that folks have asked. Other cities that have a CBO, I know about Memphis because that's my hometown. They passed one recently only because Elon Musk showed up with this terrible data center project. I know that I think Milwaukee has one. Somebody said Cleveland has one, but that's something that you can easily Google. Let's see, I've read examples of CBAs where community benefits have been scaled back to various degrees once the project is approved and close to completion. Yeah, I'd be interested to know how developers and other parties responsible for delivering these benefits are kept accountable. Okay, we can hold that until after Megan presents. City of Cleveland. Okay, yeah, she's answering that. How do you walk the line between ensuring development provides tangible benefits? Okay, yeah, we can hold that one. Let's see. For Andrew, I think she meant Aaron, since a CBA is between an entity representing the community who's the actual entity that signs a CBA or behalf of the community. I think it's between the city, right? Yeah.
That's the city. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And so
Um,
we're responsible for enforcing it as well.
okay. How often does city council approve CBOs?
They've approved 16 since 2016, since 2017.
Okay, so about one a year on average.
One to
Um,
two. Yeah.
can you give examples of common enforcement mechanism? Okay, we can hold that. NAC voting structured means that residents' direct representation is pretty limited. They can be easily outvoted by council staff. Did Prop A include more direct representation of residents?
So let me just clarify in there, it's just how they're appointed. They're
Hmm.
all residents. So it's not city
Oh,
council or
I
staff
see.
on the NAC.
I
It's all
see.
residents. It's
Gotcha.
just who appoints.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I think it's really important because sometimes people are like, oh, well,
Yeah.
because you're appointed by XYZ, it means you
Right,
must
right,
feel
right.
this way about the development. That's not
Yeah.
necessarily true. They're all
Okay.
residents. They all
Okay.
present themselves as residents.
Okay. How do you think, who do you think of as your peers in the US and perhaps elsewhere? Yeah, I was also curious, have other cities reached out to you guys for
Very
advice?
frequently.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Who are interested or who are doing this. Yes.
Okay.
Cleveland, we've talked a lot to, I'd say
Oh,
most
good.
recently.
Good. Okay. Why are so many benefits not happening without the CBO? Why are so many benefits not happening without the CBO? I'm not sure what that means. Are there changes to the development process or local regulation that could improve outcomes without so much effort and burden on the residents? Oh, okay. Oh, so they're saying, why can't this just happen as a part of the
Yeah.
development without a CBO? I see.
Do you want me to answer that now or do you want
Um,
to?
If you have a quick answer for, I mean, I feel like that's just the nature of we live
I
in a
mean,
community.
I think there's the potential that a lot of these things could be passed, a lot of the benefits. I mean, there's something called like community benefits policies kind of in the world,
Mhm.
where ordinances around development could be strengthened. And I think
Yes.
that's a legislative process.
Yeah.
I think we've kind of ground tested a lot of ideas along those, but I think it would require just a more strong legislative, like almost a community benefits policy,
Hmm.
or legislation and you know, other cities have taken different models. Cleveland might be a good
Hmm.
example to look at where they have actually kind of like more specifically spelled out what the developments are rather than kind of
Hmm.
negotiating it out project by project.
Right. Okay. Let's see. Can you discuss process of getting, okay, we can save that one. How has Detroit used this ordinance with, oh, TIP finance well, yeah, because incentives, right? These are projects.
Nuanced answer. So most of these projects do use brown tax increment
Okay.
brownfield TIF.
Brownfield.
However, brownfield TIF is not technically an abatement, qualifying abatement. So usually there's some other incentive happening
In
that triggers
addition.
it.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a legalese answer. Abatements are
Okay.
not the same as TIF.
Right.
In our ordinance says abatements.
But like, would you say a lot of them have both or no? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, majority. Yeah.
Okay. Are direct developer contributions considered tax savings or are they a donation to the community? Are they considered tax savings or are they a donation to the community?
Um, it doesn't. They don't get to use that as like say, oh, we donated, and then like we have less taxes now. Like I don't think it works like that.
Right.
Now they may already kind of figure that into what kind of tax abatement they have to ask, and
Okay.
I'm not necessarily part of those conversations.
Right.
That's more of our economic development and authority that
Right.
manages that. So I don't know how they factor this process into their financing
Right.
stack necessarily.
Right. Like it's not a direct correlation that whatever the amount of the abatement is how much they're going to
No,
offer
definitely
in community
because
benefits.
there's a
Yeah.
financial kind of argument about why they need the abatement.
Right, right. Right. The what is it called? The but-for test or
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm glad we knocked a lot of those out. So we're gonna give you the floor, Megan.
Amazing. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let me find the right screen to share. All right, wonderful. Well, Aaron, thank you so much. That was kind of just a really helpful, concrete way to see these in action, because so many times policy feels so abstract and hypothetical. So it was really nice to kind of start with something real and tangible. Really nice to meet you all. My name is Meagan Niebler. I'm our Director of Community Democracy at Fair Shake Environmental Legal Services. We're an environmental law and justice nonprofit who provides no cost and low cost direct legal representation, kind of community lawyering and education and technical assistance, as well as legal education, kind of the next generation of environmental justice attorneys. We work in primarily Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. So both big cities in our area as well as very, very small rural communities. Um, I am not a lawyer, but I work very closely with many lawyers. So always need to just make sure to say that I am not providing legal representation. Really, our goal here today is to help you all figure out what's going to work best for your community. So when we think about kind of typical development, it's an amazing question, right? Why can't this just happen? I wish that it could. It's not fair that communities really have to fight really hard to just have a foot in the door to have a seat at the table, right? Typically, when development happens, the developer talks directly with the city. Maybe these other groups, nonprofits, faith-based groups, community neighborhood groups, they may have feelings about the development, and sometimes they may spend some of their time and precious energy trying to talk with the city. But they're not always coordinated together. And very infrequently do they have a direct line right to the developer, right? What community benefits tries to do is shift that power dynamic. So in this beautiful gold ribbon metal triangle we see on our right-hand side, what we're looking at is a process, what it could look like with a community benefit process, right? The developer is talking with the city's talking with all of those groups, the groups are in that circle working together, and they have that direct line to the developer. So that's what we're really hoping to achieve, thinking about community benefits, right? How can we even out this power structure so that those community groups not only have to fight they don't have to fight to get their foot in the door, they don't have to fight to get a seat at the table, but they have an equal and equitable seat at that table. So Aaron mentioned a couple mechanisms, right? Community benefits really is kind of an umbrella term. There is no like, this is the definition per the dictionary that we all agree upon. So sometimes you may hear these terms interchangeable a little bit. Other ways that communities can bring benefits and protections are through things like development or host agreements, and those are between the municipality and the developer often, right? Directly between the two of those. Aaron just talked about ordinances, right? A local law kind of requiring a community benefit process if it meets a certain threshold or criteria. We've got community benefit agreements, which happen typically on like a project by project situation. And we like to really think about them as prioritizing community coalitions. So it really is a kind of typically a signed agreement, a legal private contract between that community group and the company. We've got good neighbor agreements, which kind of happen, right? You can see that little hourglass on the end of a development. So if something's operating and not being a good neighbor, that's a way to bring them, as well as settlement and fines sometimes bring benefits and protections. Again, if an operator is not being a good neighbor and polluting, exceeding their permit limits. So there's a range of ways to bring benefits and protections to communities. Each one is going to involve different people. Each one is going to involve different leverage needs to make that thing move forward. They're also not individual, right? You'll see those puzzle pieces. There are ways to kind of puzzle piece a lot of these things together based on the situation and context. So that all sounds great, right? But we all know, again, going back to the question of like, why isn't just this happening all the time? Is that there's a wide range of the ways that municipalities typically engage communities and residents in decision-making processes. So if we're looking at the spectrum of community engagement to ownership, the same thing applies for community benefit ordinances or practices or policies or processes, right? We have seen lots of examples of community benefits that can bring very amazing, beautiful, transparent processes, concrete, tangible benefits that are wanted by the community, building up community and community cohesion, right? They're really, really well. We've also seen lots of examples of community benefit agreements from across the country that kind of lead to the opposite of that, right? Folks are not brought in and part of that process. It lacks transparency. Those folks don't have the resources or technical knowledge or support that they need to have the best opportunity to influence that. There's unequal bargaining power. And it really goes to the process, right? Where in this spectrum is either the ordinance or the agreement, and who is participating, who's at the table, what decision-making power do they have, and how is their transparency built into back to the broader community? So really important things to think about as we're thinking about both agreements, ordinances, and other types of community benefits and protections. So through our work, we kind of are really attuned to 3 red flags. And again, this goes to agreements, if you're thinking about ordinances, kind of whatever sort of mechanism you're thinking about. A weak process, disempowered negotiation, leading to an unenforceable or weak contract. And so what that looks like for us is the weak process. You don't have the right people at the table. They don't have real decision-making power. There's not transparency back with the broader community. Disempowered negotiation, those folks do not have the resources they need. They don't have the legal, the engineering, the public health, the scientific, the city planning, right? The folks who can really help them understand the full context of that situation and have an equal seat at that negotiation table. And then the unenforceable contract, right? These end up in agreements that have kind of like language that maybe doesn't have measurable outcomes. There's no time bound. There's not strong enforcement mechanisms or ongoing collaboration to kind of work through the challenges that inevitably come up, right? because all these things are like the best ideas written down on a piece of paper and then tried out. So needing to have really smart, specific, measurable, actionable, time-bound language within those agreements to make sure that they can be real and kind of teethy. So when we're thinking about ordinances, there's a number of questions. A lot of these get at the ones Aaron spoke about earlier to help you think about like, what is this ordinance going to look like for us? This is important for big cities, and this is also really important for kind of the small, more rural communities that we are working in and supporting, right? What's going to trigger the ordinance? What's the benefits floor, and what else can be put on that table to negotiate and talk through? How are we going to make sure that the language in those benefits and protections does follow that SMART language, right? That we all know, SMARTY goals. The process questions, who's at the table? What power do they have? What transparency do they have? How is community, the broader community, brought into that conversation and be able to provide feedback and input? And what resources do those groups of folks have? And then the oversight, right? Who's playing what role and responsibility at what time and with what resources? And what happens when it's not working or if a part of it is not working? So if we look at some different kind of examples of community benefit ordinances, I am not going to read through all of these. We can definitely share slides or share a link to these on our website, but you'll see kind of different ways that different cities have answered those questions, right? We've got Detroit's that Aaron kind of shared. Richmond, California passed one that has, again, slightly different ways of answering those questions. And the ways that you're going to answer those questions are going to impact the way that it rolls out and is implemented, right? And same with Cleveland, right? Slightly different process. Again, we'll share these slides so that you can kind of take a more detailed look at each of these. But again, the important thing to think about is like, what does this look like for your community? As you're thinking about ordinances, especially we are involved in lots of conversations around ordinances with data centers. How can you make sure that that process is going to answer these questions to make sure that you and your community have the most power within that space? So that we don't end up back at a community benefit agreement or ordinance that still lands you on that like left side of the spectrum of community engagement, right? Of communities just being informed at best, right? We want to make sure that communities and residents are really driving these processes. So I'll put a few kind of links in the chat. We've got a community benefit guide that has lots of examples and templates. And then we also have I know there's been some data center questions in here. We also have a data center decision tree that's kind of a visual roadmap to help communities identify what they can do to try and stop or mitigate harm from data centers. I know there are like so many more spaces that we could like crawl into and talk. And so I want to leave room for a few questions and conversation. But I'll throw those links in the chat and excited to kind of hear what other questions are bubbling up.
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you. And I'm hoping that you guys have a few minutes that you can stay on if we need to, just to try to get through as many of these questions as possible. I do want to talk about data centers really quickly because that seems to be the most relevant thing that's bubbling up right now. And I feel like it's gotten like it's accelerated so fast that I'm seeing like PR firms that have now become like experts in negotiating CBAs, which is, I mean, just rich on so many levels. But yeah, what are you guys seeing specifically from communities that are getting hit up by
Yeah.
data centers?
So I think overall, we have talked with probably hundreds of different towns and communities around data centers right now, and nobody wants it. And so I think that's an important place to start. Community benefit agreements are not always the right tool in the toolbox for communities.
Hmm.
Community benefit agreements can be fantastic ways if folks are like, we want this thing here if X, Y, and Z, right? We're excited about, Aaron, to your example, this hospital expansion, right? This is great for our community, and here are the things we'd love to see so that we can all kind of be good neighbors together.
Right.
With data centers, most communities are not in that position, right? That's not how they're feeling about the data center coming in. So a lot of the folks that we're working with are really trying to stop the data center.
Yeah.
There are times then that that data center maybe gets their zoning permit, maybe gets some state permits, and the community may then shift to, we got to mitigate harm, right? How can we build up the leverage to get this company to the table to negotiate a CBA? So that's a lot of the conversations we're having. On the flip side, there are other conversations that we are having around zoning and including community benefit processes within zoning kind of conditional use or special exception approvals.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a way so that if, there's some automatic, again, kind of protections and processes in place. With those, again, I'm happy to kind of share some examples, but really thinking about how do we structure the words in that zoning language to make sure that the process is strong, that you have residents involved, that there's transparency built into it, and some other ways to make sure that we don't see community benefits end up in that space, that communities are still excluded and that there's no transparency in that process.
Right. Okay. Aaron, did you want to say anything on data centers?
It's I'll just say that there's a whole other kind of process going on at the city, led by city council in order to kind of like
Okay.
look at zoning and development rules around data centers. I'll also say, just from a practicality standpoint, for the data centers obviously existed long before we kind of entered this whole like hyperscale data center conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there is not the available land in the city of Detroit for a hyperscale data center, from my understanding. So it
Yeah.
seems like we may not be necessarily facing that threat within the boundaries of the city of Detroit, although there are a lot planned in our metro region area. So a lot of
Yeah.
conversation at the state level happening.
There's a very controversial one that is asking for a zoning exemption in a very urban part of Atlanta, actually very close to a train station, which doesn't make any sense. But I feel like I don't know if you actually like spelled this out, Aaron, when you were going over your lessons from Detroit, but in my opinion, the most important lesson for other cities, and this applies to data centers, because what I hear a lot for folks that are proponents of a data center coming to their neighborhood is like, this is a piece of land that like nobody wants to do anything else with it. It's never going to get any other. But I feel like Detroit's experience has been the opposite. Like, is it fair to say that without the CBO, do you feel like you would have had a lot more development or that the city would have grown faster than it has?
That is a very interesting question that I don't necessarily have the answer to, because I'm not necessarily, from where I sit, I'm not necessarily in the space to know about like what deals didn't happen, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
So you don't know what the opportunity cost
Cost.
was,
I've
right?
heard I've heard from some of my colleagues that there has been an opportunity cost. And I
Okay.
think you will also observe that the projects that are getting done, they're going through the CBO process, tend to be from developers, entities, companies that are already very heavily invested in the city of Detroit.
Okay. Okay.
Um, Two of the big three automakers, obviously long legacy in the city of Detroit, have
Yeah.
gone through it, and the third one might be going through it quite soon.
Okay.
Um, are some of our sports teams, some of our, and other people, smaller scale developers who are Detroiters who want to do something in the city. So
Right. Yeah. They're invested in the city's wellness, is what you're saying. The city's.
I'm trying to think of an example. There's a couple examples where it's more of you know, a group that wasn't necessarily, it might be new to the city as far as
Yeah.
development is concerned. I can think of at least one example. It was a smaller project, but they were still local to the region, I would say. So
Okay. That's fair.
yeah,
Okay, so now going back to some of these bigger questions that we didn't answer. Um, have either of you seen instances where through the process the benefits were significantly scaled back once the project is approved or is close to completion? And how do you avoid that is the question.
I can jump in. I think that kind of goes back to one of those red flags, right? With what is written in the agreement and how is it written? We have seen and read many CBAs that the language is pretty kind of like abstract or hypothetical. It's a lot of like promises, right? Um, when, you know, working on a CBA, that's why it's so important and critical to have kind of everything written down in ways that is specific, measurable, actionable, and time bound, right? You want to be able to measure it and come back to, this thing is working or not working. And then within that kind of enforcement accountability, typically some of the strongest examples we've seen kind of walk through kind of a escalatory process, right? You start off just like, hey, this isn't working. Let's talk through it. What's going
Hmm.
well? What's the challenge? How can we overcome that challenge?
Right.
If that conversation doesn't work, right, you can kind of bump up that escalation, right? Is it
Yeah.
with within arbitration to work through that and then up through, is it zoning permit appeals? Is it kind of, legal court kind of processes?
Hmm.
So kind of working up the, how do we make sure that A, we can measure this thing to make sure it's happening. We all have clear roles and responsibilities in making sure that's happening. And then if it's not happening, what's the process that we're going to work to kind of solve that?
Hmm.
So those are some of the ways that kind of our attorneys help communities try and mitigate that in the bud, knowing that again, oftentimes it's like everyone's ideally best attempt written on a piece of paper. Very infrequently is it going to go perfect. There's going to be
Right.
some bumps and bruises, and that's part of the process. But as you know, you got to be able to like work through those bumps and bruises in like good faith efforts with that very specific and concrete language written into the contract.
Hmm. And Aaron, you quickly mentioned the body or the accountability mechanism. It's like the civil something commission.
Sure. We have, so the ordinance lays out something called the Enforcement Committee, which
Oh,
is made up
okay.
of my department, the Civil Rights Inclusion Department, Law Department, some other bodies.
I
But
see. Okay.
practically speaking, the Civil Rights Department takes the lead in that space as
Okay.
far as monitoring, fielding complaints. They're kind of like, considered the neutral kind of arbiter of like, is a project meeting its benchmarks in their reporting or not? Let's follow, and there's a process how complaints can be, adjudicated both informally and formally. Our approach as far as like enforcement is um, basically from an administrative side is a right to cure. Like we can put a project on a compliance plan
Mm-hmm.
and basically say, you need to, get in line basically on
Hmm.
this XYZ, commitment you made. Otherwise, you're going to get a bad report. And then city council will see it. And city council is really the only one that has any power to do any sort of like clawback of anything.
Okay.
That has not happened. Usually, a compliance plan, in the rare occasion where we've had to put a project on a compliance plan, that's usually enough. Save one project that's actually like in bankruptcy and litigation, but I'll just kind of like set that one to
Hmm.
the side for the moment because that's a special case. But to like what Meagan said as well, like I think it matters what's written in the agreement, legally speaking.
Hmm.
We've learned a lot from our earliest kind of agreements. We're very much that kind of like aspirational, kind of fuzzy language, not
Hmm.
a real
Hmm.
clear like timeline when X commitment would happen. Um, how do we really know? Not necessarily smart, specific, measurable, all that. So I would say in the last 6, 7 years, we've really, in the agreement drafting process, have made a very conservative effort to make sure, because it also just makes our job like impossible. It's like, how do we know if they did a good job or not?
Right. Right.
How do we know they did this thing that we all thought they were going to do? So, from our perspective, we are really looking for like, and it's tied a lot of times to project benchmarks. When construction commences on this building, within 90 days, the developer will do
Hmm.
this.
Hmm.
When upon groundbreaking, within X amount of days, they will do this. Like as much as possible, and obviously it's a negotiation. So, to the extent that developers, comfortable committing to these things and feels like,
Hmm.
because they don't want to commit to something that they're not going to have success in either.
Right.
So,
Right.
but yeah, so I think our agreements look a lot different than they did in 2017. A lot more detailed. and a lot more specific.
That's great. Let me pause since we're past the hour and just thank everybody that joined us, and everybody that's still with us. I'm gonna keep you guys just for a few more minutes to try to get through a few of these questions, but this will be on our YouTube page, the Just Communities YouTube page. So if you have to go, you can get the rest of it there. Okay, let's see. Um, why are so many? Okay, we already answered that. Let's see. Have you come across a CBA with a school district? Interesting. Have you, either one of you come across that?
I've absolutely seen and heard school districts be part of a coalition. So they may always be
Okay.
the signatories or like who is actually signing the final document, but they're part of a broader coalition that's working on and negotiating. And they can be incredible partners, right? Because um, uh, a lot of CBAs may include like job training or workforce development as part of that, and the school district
Hmm.
play a really critical role in moving those goals forward in whatever ways that those look like.
Hmm. But
Yeah.
this actually poses an interesting question that I hadn't thought about, which is when a public entity, a school district or the city itself is doing some major development, would the CBO apply or how would that work?
Is
So
that
like,
is that a question specific to Detroit or in general?
I guess, sure.
Um, that's a very interesting legal question because it gets into kind of like intergovernmental things because the school district is a
Right,
separate, governmental entity.
right.
And I'm not a lawyer, although I do talk to them. Um, try to learn things.
Yeah.
So from a legalistic perspective, I don't know if our ordinance, like, let's just say, because, well, I think you get back to like one of the basic, triggering things of our ordinance. A school district doesn't pay property taxes. So if they're not seeking a tax abatement or land from the
Oh,
city, then they wouldn't necessarily qualify. Now, if they were for some reason, and maybe there's a case to be made that they would in some reason, then I don't know. Quite
yeah.
honestly, I would know that, like, okay, I'll take another example. Let's say, and this has happened, a university, which is a creature of our
Hmm.
state government, has a
Hmm.
project, and doing that, they would not be required to follow our
Oh,
ordinance because
interesting.
we can't tell state government to follow our laws.
Wow.
Um, nor can we tell the federal government to, for that matter.
Right.
Um, Now, interestingly, the hospital project I mentioned with Henry Ford Health was actually a partnership with Michigan State University, and so
Hmm.
they did, of their own volition, participate. But
Okay. Oh,
another
but it
example,
was voluntary.
University of Michigan, go
Hmm.
blue, as I said before, is building a new campus in Detroit, and they were very much specific, like we are not
Oh,
doing
wow.
this, despite they had a lot of public pressure from their own community, their own faculty, their own
Yeah.
students to do that, and they said
No,
thanks,
thank
no
you.
thanks.
It's interesting.
So
Um, okay. One more. Let's see if there's any burning question. Okay, we talked about data centers. Da, 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 da. Our direct developer contributions can, okay, we talked about that. How do CBOs integrate with a community sustainability resilience plan? That's a good one. Climate action plan, etc. Have you done any of that kind of integrating sustainability, like citywide sustainability protocols or policies into a project?
um, I guess I'll speak first. I'm interested to see how this is working in other cities. I would say not enough,
Yeah.
not as much as I would necessarily like. And I think one thing to kind of keep in mind, at least of our process, is like, okay, so planning and development, we provide kind of like our view of like what potential impacts are on this project, and we usually include a sustainability component too, and we frame it in terms of like impacts and also opportunities. What are some opportunities associated with this project?
Mm-hmm.
And so we can offer suggestions, but I also think it's just a reality that every neighborhood advisory council is different. They're all going to have a different perspective on what they're prioritizing, and there's only so much bandwidth. And some things, I guess get left on the cutting room floor in a way, or it's not that they're not addressed, but it's like it's not where they focus their energy, their
Right,
negotiating energy. So like,
right.
unless you have someone on neighborhood advisory council who is really truly like an advocate for a building being net zero,
Mm-hmm.
or um, designing a building that's not going to kill birds, through glass,
Right,
you know, these things come up. Um, then it's probably not going to be the focus of the agreement, or like what's kind of like included in there is probably not going to go much beyond what's already required by city code.
right,
Um, now, so I'd say there's more that could be done there, but I think that also gets to like sometimes where it's like if we had just stronger overall development
right.
ordinances and policies
Zoning ordinances, right.
to address those things, I think it's a more efficient way. It provides more stability in the development process. Because I think one of the biggest kind of pushbacks we get probably from the development community is like we don't know what the community is going to ask for. How do we prepare for this financially, otherwise, And I think it's a fair kind of thing because I think developers are willing to do a lot of things if they kind of know what's expected of them. If they don't know what's expected of them, I think that's where they get more uncomfortable.
Right. I agree. I mean, especially when it comes to climate stuff, it should just be the policies that apply to everybody, every development project, and not a condition of, you know, getting an abatement. Um, do you have thoughts on that, Megan? Closing thoughts?
I agree with everything Aaron said.
Yeah.
I think attaching it to kind of those uh, other zoning nuisance ordinances, whatever it may be, will then make sure that they apply to every single situation instead of just like this agreement over here with this company, but not necessarily made it into this agreement over here with that company. I do think from kind of monitoring those city sustainability plans could be really helpful because
Mm.
oftentimes they are designed and created in ways that, have some checkpoints and benchmarks already written into their
Mm-hmm.
planning and, 5-year plan and 10-year plan, whatever they may be doing. And so if there are ways to also help with the monitoring of a CBO or CBA outcomes within that process, that can take some of the burden off of a community coalition, for example. So I think that they could be a pretty big support. But other than that, I fully
Yeah.
agree with what y'all were saying.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't even realize when I organized this that this was the 10-year anniversary. So not only was Detroit the first major city to do this, but now you're 10 years into it. So congratulations for that. And let's hope that there are many more cities in the next 10 years that adopt CBOs. And thank you, everyone that's still here. Again, you can catch this on our website, justcommunities.info, or our YouTube page. Thank you guys for Megan and Aaron for being with us, and we'll see all of you next month, hopefully.
Just one quick note.
Oh,
I know
yes.
someone asked about my slides. I'm happy to should I upload them here? I'm happy to share them. It's not a problem. Um,
Sure, you can do that quickly. I mean, obviously they'll be in the recording, but yeah, if you want to do that
okay,
really quickly
give me
before
one
we
second. I just
exit.
prepared the
Um,
PDF.
yeah, and actually, while you're doing that, Megan, do you want to share your contact info one last time?
Sure, yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
And yeah, always happy. Don't hesitate to reach out, and we are happy to help.
Thank you. And you guys work in 3 states, is that right?
Yeah, so primarily we're in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia, but happy to chat with folks from across the country
Okay.
and share resources. We don't have attorneys licensed in those other states, so we can either
Gotcha.
help make a referral or, again, generally just provide resources as helpful.
Okay. All right. Okay, and there is Aaron's stuff. So thank you, everyone, and see you next month.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate the conversation.
Here.